Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tanya Bork, and I will be presenting Start Engagement with the Best Recruitment Practices. Please bear with me. I have a little bit of a cold this morning, or this afternoon, rather. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the presentation and then take questions periodically after a certain number of slides. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about why it's important to have the best recruitment practices, and what does that how does that translate into engagement? So why does engagement first start with recruitment practices? You've got to think of first contact. From when the first time a person reaches out to a company or a company reaches out to a person about a job, how do they feel about that contact? The recruitment practices that happen in between the first contact and onboarding and the first day of work. So everything that kind of happens in between, and then your first day of work and so on. So let's talk about how did you make that first contact? Did the candidate apply directly to your company? Did they go onto your website and apply, or did they find a job ad? Did you find the candidate's resume on a job board or a website, and then made the contact? Did the candidate apply through a third-party agency, or was the candidate an employee referral? So if the candidate applied, how long did the application take them to submit their application? So just here's a little bit of data on applicant tracking systems and some other information that's useful. So 75% of recruiters and hiring professionals use a recruiting or applicant tracking system. 94% of recruiters and hiring professionals say that their ATS or recruiting software has positively impacted their hiring process. Only 4% will say that it has a negative impact or negative effect. However, this is really different with what job seekers and applicants are feeling. So as you can see, 80% of them describe their online job search and online applications as stressful. 60% of excuse me. I apologize. 60% of job candidates are unable to complete their online application due to encountering some technical hurdles. As many as 75% of qualified applicants are rejected by ATSs due to spurious reasons like incorrect resume formatting. 60% of applicants quit an online application because it's too complex or too long, while 70% of applicants feel that the online application should be 5 steps or fewer. Only 40% of employers think the same way. So this is a huge contrast if you think about what businesses are actually doing versus what applicants feel businesses should be doing. So almost 40% of recruiters and hiring managers have not gone through the application process on their own website to test it. This is a big deal. If you don't know what your candidates are going through, how can you empathize or help them? So as a requirement, every recruiter should go through the application process. Every hiring manager should test out the application process. And this also gives you a good idea of what's going on the outside. In one test, a company created a perfect resume for an ideal candidate for a clinical scientist role. It scored a mere 43% relevance because the ATS it was submitted to misread it. So this kind of gives you an idea that automation isn't all it's cracked up to be, and a lot of mistakes are happening through electronic systems. and we're missing out on applicants because of it. We're also not providing the best candidate experience. So in another test, one large firm found that the resumes of 3 out of 5 of their top engineers were screened out automatically by their ATS as not relevant. So these are some really scary statistics. Now, another question that I have is your application available on mobile devices? A lot of people are abandoning computers for tablets, iPads, and cell phones. And if your application is not on mobile, you're missing out on a large number of applicants. Applications shouldn't take any longer than 5 minutes to complete, and resumes should be able to be parsed. And that means that you shouldn't have to enter all of the data that's on your resume again. It just takes too long. It's important to make the application process as simple as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and check and see if there's any questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions as of yet? I'm going to give about a moment or two. Okay, no questions. So how did you connect with the candidate once you sourced them? And this is, they didn't apply directly, they're passive. What did you do? Now, are you personalizing your messages, or are you just sending a whole bunch of bulk emails from nowhere? It's always a great idea and always the best practice to personalize your message. And when you're personalizing your message, you want to do some research on your candidates and get to know them a little bit better. And then after you've done personalizing that message, even if they are not interested in the job, how are you staying connected? Are you keeping up with them on a regular basis? How are you staying in touch? And these are just some really important things to keep in mind. I want to talk about this, and this really bothers me quite a bit, more so nowadays than ever, as I get a lot of connection requests. So unless you really know the person, you really shouldn't be sending them this generic LinkedIn request. It's always a better idea to personalize that request. Hi, Brian, I saw your profile here. We met at this event, and always, try to give as much detail as possible in that request. You're more likely to get your request accepted if you're providing those details. Yep, personalization really helps build relationships. This is a really cool personalized email from a recruiter to a candidate. And as you can see, this recruiter did a lot of research on this candidate, provided some of the detail of that research, and really went into detail as into what they're looking for, and really left it open for the candidate to reach out or to connect back. They talked about the projects that the candidate completed, and in this case, Peter. Peter had a bunch of projects. Talked about, the company and what they're looking for, and really gave a lot of detail as to why the contact was a fit. So, fit goes both ways. It's got to be a good fit for the candidate and for the recruiter, for the company. Fit is not a one-way street. So you want to keep it simple and sweet, and this is just some general guidelines for contact. If you're calling a candidate, voicemail should be short and focused, 30 to 45 seconds tops. Emails should be kept to 2 to 3 short paragraphs. Facebook messages, if you're reaching out to candidates through Facebook, 2 to 3 casual sentences. And messages on Twitter, limit it to 140 characters. And you want to kind of stay away from any job-related info until you actually engaged in that conversation. And this is information coming from Dice. All right. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to stop for a moment and check on if there's any questions. No questions? Okay. So I want to talk about personalized Twitter messages. Now, you can use Twitter to engage with, with potential candidates. It's not recommended that you just spit out jobs because no one is really going to see them if you have a lot of connections. It's hard to get those shared and get those viewed. It's really a waste. And when I say spit out jobs, you go ahead and you post a link for someone to apply and say, I have this opening. That's what I mean by posting jobs. It's really a good idea to post stories about your organization or the technology or technology and industry-related posts. You also want to engage in conversation with people in your company's industry and get to know them and get them to refer people to you. It's really all about building that relationship. You want to go ahead and learn to use hashtags properly. You have a greater chance of your posts being viewed if you're using them properly. And you want to build a following. And I don't recommend paying for followers. You want to follow and be followed. So another practice I wanted to talk about was third-party agencies that you may or may not work with. You want to talk about how they treat the candidates. I'm going to give you a really good example. I get a lot of messages day in and day out for jobs, and sometimes I respond to them just to see what other agencies are like. And the one thing that I found was a lot of agencies were submitting my resume to companies just based on emails. They weren't talking to me. They weren't getting to know me. They were just sending out resumes. They were sending out these mass emails with a lot of like a questionnaire to fill out, and then sending my resume out to the companies. And that really disturbed me because they had no clue if I was a real person, if if any of the details on my resume matched my LinkedIn profile, anything at all about me other than the questionnaire that they sent out to me and my resume. So I found that to be really disturbing, and it made me feel that the quality of the candidate experience really went down. When this happened, I never really got to talk to a real recruiter, and it's gonna be very disturbing for anybody who's working on the other side of corporate and receiving these resumes, and they realize that the candidate doesn't know anything about the position. The candidate doesn't know very much about the company. All they know is that their resume's been submitted for this role, and this is the salary, and this is the location. Another thing you want to take a look at is if they outsource. I remember when I was job searching, I would get a lot of robocalls. And when I mean robocalls, it would be agencies from the other side of the world. There weren't recruiters working in the U.S. They were working in India or China or Russia. And I would get a lot of these calls, and I couldn't understand a word that some of the recruiters were saying. And so I thought that this was a really bad practice. You also want to talk to them about how they're screening the candidates. Are they screening the candidates properly? Do they have someone on board who can do technical screenings if it's an engineering role? These are really, really important things to ask. You also want to acquaint them with your company as much as possible. Give them as much information as possible so that they can, provide the candidates with really good information. So I also ask, and when I was in corporate, I would ask, well, what's the resume to fit ratio? How many resumes are they submitting to me that fit the position, and how many are just junk? And that's something to also consider. And you might ask, well, why is this important to the candidate engagement and experience? Well, if agencies are submitting resumes to hiring managers that aren't a fit and not getting back to those candidates, those candidates are going to have a bad candidate experience, and that reflects on your organization as well. So another factor is you want to look at how they source profiles. Like where do their resumes come from? Are they calling people off of job boards? Are they connecting people through LinkedIn? Are they do they have their own database? All right, I'm going to move forward with the next slide. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. So here's some more statistics to keep in mind. On average, every corporate job opening attracts 250 resumes. 4 to 6 of these people will be called, for an interview, and only one will be offered a job, obviously. Here are 5 things that job seekers take into account when accepting a job offer. Salary and compensation, of course, career growth opportunities, work-life balance, location, commute, company culture, and values. So it's really important to communicate as much information as possible to candidates, and that's how you're providing them a really good experience. 94% of sales professionals say that the base salary is the most important element of their compensation plan. So if you're, recruiting a lot of sales professionals, this is something to keep in mind. Now, only 62% of sales professionals said that commission is the most important factor. People generally want to know, and this can go for any position that you're working on that has a bonus or a variable component, they want to know what their take-home pay is going to be at the very worst. So 79% of job seekers use social media in their search. This is also a really important factor. If you're not using social media to attract candidates, then you're really far behind the rest of your peers. 86% of younger job seekers who are in the first 10 years of their career use social media to find a job. Now, this next statistic is kind of scary. It says 2 in 3 employees say their employer does not know how to use social media to promote job openings. So we're really missing out on a large pool of people by not promoting things properly. And here's some other statistics. 45% of job seekers use their mobile devices to search for jobs at least once a day. 54% read company reviews on their mobile, and 52% research salary information. And this is how mobile devices are being used in the job search. That 54% that's reading company reviews is also reading about interview reviews and application process. So how one candidate is treated can really affect your entire process just by really one bad review. And word of mouth spreads very fast. So when recruiting millennials, there's 3 things that you want to look. They're looking for in a company, and they want to know about the growth opportunities, retirement benefits, and work culture. The second one kind of surprised me, but there's a lot of companies that aren't offering a 401k match, and that's become a very big, a very big thing that a lot of candidates have asked me about. So another very interesting thing with millennials is 64% would take a lesser salary if they were in a job that they loved versus a really high salary in a job that they thought was boring. That's another reason why it's really important to provide as much information as possible. So, here's some other statistics about millennials and other job seekers as well. Now, this is a really interesting one. Number 10, 69% of job seekers will not take a job with a company with a bad reputation, even if they're unemployed. And 84% would consider leaving their current job if they were offered a job with an excellent reputation. So reputation is everything. So if you're, increasing your employee engagement by 10%, you're on average, you're increasing, company profits by $2,400 per an employee. And that's what statistics have found. All right. Before I forward over to the next slide, are there any questions? Oh. Okay, I have one question. Are there any other statistics on time to fill or the challenge in filling commission sales jobs roles or specific engagement practices? Well, I don't have any statistics in my slides, but it really depends what type of sales roles that you're filling. I've done a lot of pre-sales roles, and those require someone with an engineering background who can do sales. And there are, statistics to that. It really depends on your process. So if you have a very long hiring process, it'll obviously take you more time to fill. If it's a really niche type of sales role, it'll definitely take you more time to fill. I've seen those type of searches go from anywhere to 3 to 6 months, depending on, what type of sales it is. So if you'd like, I can provide you some more information on that if you'd like to email me at the end, and we can go from there. So another thing I want to talk about is employee referrals and how they're handled. So you want to make this process very simple. Mainly because employees are referring their friends to come work at the company that they're working at, and you want them to feel really good about doing that. And you want to provide really good incentives to get referrals. And usually it's monetary compensation. I've seen anywhere from $500 to $2,000 for a referral within different organizations. A really cool thing about employee referrals is it's the least expensive way to hire. And you're 7 times more likely to be hired than a general applicant. Employee referrals are generally a lower cost than any other source, which is also really good to consider. So here's just a couple of different campaigns that are out there. There's a lot of them. The really cool one that I've seen lately is having an event and bringing a friend to interview. And that's become increasingly popular at a variety of different organizations, and even has helped certain companies with diversity. So here's some two really neat campaigns. The first one outlines the instructions on how to refer someone. The second one is more of a bland campaign, saying that at this day and this time we're having an event. And these are all of the biggest complaints about recruiting from applicants. And if you look at each and every one of these, it all revolves around 2 things: automation and improved communication. So all of these things can be really remedied if we improve our communication process. And we improve our application process, and we let people know where they are in the process. So I just wanted to, provide some closing thoughts. And one thing I did want to say, that it's really important to personalize your messages. Provide more of a human touch. We have all of this technology, yet we're not reaching out to candidates properly. We're missing people that would be really great for our organizations. We're making the process a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And that's one thing that we really need to look into. And the best way to look into it is to test your own process. See how long it takes to go through the application process. See what it feels like to be an applicant. And if something doesn't sink in with you, then make a suggestion to have that fixed. I'm not saying, revamp the whole process, but keep your process simple. And you want to communicate as much as possible. Even if you're doing this through automation, you need to let candidates know where they are in the process. And acknowledge that they took the time to fill out an application, or to express interest in talking to you about a position. All right. I just wanted to thank everyone for their time. I know that it's been really short. I'm going to just see if anybody has any questions before I close out. Okay, I'm going to give it about another minute. All right. Thank you, everyone who joined the presentation. If you have any questions or need any help at all, my email address is right above. Feel free to contact me anytime. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you very much.